So when I was asked to come out here and talk to you guys, I figured, how did I want to do this? Do I want to say I was the dumb kid who didn't fit in? Was I the really successful adult? So what I decided to do is I kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit and kind of show something kind of right down the middle. So I kept this pretty casual. I replaced this slide about 5 different times trying to figure out what would be the best place to approach people, kids, adults, everything else. This sounds pretty impressive, but I think one of the things that I take the most pride in is the fact that if you kind of go back in history, if you take a look at kind of who I was as a kid, I was the kid that fit in but didn't really fit in. I'd almost call myself invisible. I was a kid that was kind of artistic, but not really. I doodled, but I couldn't draw. I couldn't paint. I couldn't sculpt. I couldn't do a lot of different things. I did horrible in school, which is kind of funny. My high school GPA was a 2.1. Which I think is pretty much like, thank you, but keep going, just go. But the funny thing is it never affected me. It never really affected my self-conscious. My parents were always there to support. My brothers were always there to kind of help out. And in a weird kind of way, I always was kind of drawn to sport. And back then, I had no idea what that meant because I was a horrible athlete. I would describe myself as the last guy picked for the best team. So I never played. I think my 14-year-old daughter calls it the master of left bench. That was kind of her position. And so for me to have such a long and happy and very fortunate career within sporting goods has been kind of ironic because you just never know where your path's going to take you. And so one of the things that I kind of learned about myself along the way is that I didn't see things the way that I was supposed to see. I realized that I wasn't a dumb kid. I just didn't learn what they told me. Which is kind of strange, right? I learned a different approach, that things weren't black and white in my head. I always saw different options, which I guess is the very definition of creativity, right? It's easy to say that you're artistic, you can draw really well. For me, no, it wasn't. It was a little bit of that. It was just a creative interpretation of things. And so for me, I just felt like I was always the guy that just saw things a little bit differently. And so from high school to college, I took 5 years off. I went to Alaska for 2 years, backpacked all throughout Alaska, kind of got in touch with nature, kind of hippy-dippy, whatever, hiked around, took plane rides everywhere, just kind of explored life to try and figure out how I fit in. I went to Europe for a year, backpacked through Europe, went to all the museums, the Louvre, all these places that you're taught in high school, a little bit of college, took some junior college classes, but I didn't really know how I fit into things. And so after 5 years, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and go to college. I think I'm kind of ready now. It wasn't ready for me when I was 17, 18 years old. It took me a little bit of extra time to kind of get going. So one of the things that I kind of just learned about myself is that I didn't need to run from not knowing the facts and knowns about everything, that I can kind of embrace it. So one of the things that I found that I had a really good natural aptitude was just, it's a cliche now, but it's innovation and just invention. The 40 patents, that's one of the things that I'm probably the most proud about because I don't see things how I'm supposed to see. This bike doesn't look like it's supposed to look. If you talk to engineering, it's supposed to be 2 diamonds because that's the optimal structure. It should be made from steel or aluminum. Carbon fiber is too expensive. It's too complicated to make. I'm naturally curious. I'm not really interested in what people think that they know about something. I'm more into the potential of an idea. And I always say that marketing and engineering, they always deal in opportunities. I deal in potential. My job as a designer, as a creative, is to take something that's basic and expand it into whole new areas. And a lot of times it's just called questions. Without new questions, there would be no new answers. And so one of the things that I do in my creative approach is I'm always asking, okay, what do we know about this and what do we not know? In philosophical terms, there's a term called inductive or deductive reasoning, right? You start with a false and you answer it. You solve the problem that you're defined. I've always kind of worked off of inductive reasoning, which is the opposite. It's starting with a false, ending with a false. In a way, it's kind of screwing things up. I'm pretty good at screwing things up. In junior high, I rode a bicycle with a tricycle front wheel on it. Weirdest kid ever, probably. But I think for me, it was like, well, why not pedal off the front wheel? And now cars are front wheel drive. Back then, they weren't. And so all of this kind of fed into who I was. And so when I graduated from Art Center College of Design, I decided, you know what? I just want to have fun. Internet wasn't out yet. Computers were just starting to happen. There were no cell phones. I wanted to kind of, in a way, unplug and go back to basics. I had built lots of bikes when I was a kid. I'm like, I want to design bicycles, man. I just want to goof off and have fun. And the first project out of school was this one here. Can you guys take a guess at how old this bike is? 5 years, 10 years, 12 years? This bike's almost 30 years old. The wheels are actually locked up because it's been sitting for so long in my garage. Pretty profound. Even when I pull it out, I was like, wow, that's still pretty cool. And so the irony is, and so when I graduated college, within 4 months of this bike coming out, it was voted third most influential mountain bike of all time. Just because of my stupid question, like, why does it have to do this? Let's try that. And then luckily I had a really great group of engineers that were really smart, and they really knew what was going on. And they're like, wow, we could totally make that. I'm like, we can? I'm like, yeah. So it was a small team of 3 of us working for about 9 months to create this bike. Museum of Modern Art in New York, Cooper Hewitt in New York, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, where this bike has been over the last, again, 30 some odd years. At Nike, I was a global creative director in charge of athletic training and team sports equipment and sport accessories. That's a lot of crap. It's stuff. It's not footwear, it wasn't apparel, and it wasn't digital. It was everything else. So I was responsible for the iPhone, iPod, the Shuffle, all of the armbands that the running accessories were. These are the projects that I worked on. All the water bottles. How many people here have a Nike water bottle? Yeah, I probably designed those too. So I'm kind of the guy that wasn't exactly mainstream. I liked the randomness. I liked the let's try this, let's try that, and mixing and matching of different things. As I moved forward out of Trek Bicycle, I'm like, I want to have some fun. Let's get into some tech stuff. How many here, okay, good question. How many here have not heard of Napster? Anybody ever heard? Hands straight up. Napster was the very first file sharing ever. What, mom and dad, how old? What, mid-90s, maybe, late 90s? It was how you could share music. So I worked on the very first, actually the second generation Napster website. Transparency. I'm like, these windows are hard. Why don't we just make them transparent? Let's get rid of all the color and make them white. Stupid question. Took off. Most recently, I've been working with a lot of smart startups around parking applications. So working on the branding of it, the user experience, the UI everybody talks about now. I'm not a traditional designer where I just do one thing. I do a variety of different things with a variety of different tools. So just because you're not a photographer, you're not a writer, you're not an artist, it doesn't matter. If you're an industrial designer like myself, you learn a variety of different tools and skills that allow you to be whoever it is that you are. And most importantly for me, allows you to have fun. Before coming to Nike, I was tapped by Fox Racing. Raise of hands, who hasn't heard of Fox Racing? Motocross? Yeah, it's cutting edge stuff. I have 7 patents on this one helmet alone. Like, why can't we make a bicycle helmet with a rigid shell? Simple, right? Nobody had ever asked that before. So this is literally all cored out. There's airflow going 5 different directions in here. We put this in a virtual wind tunnel, blew air all over it. And they were like, wow. And in all honesty, too, the first marketing people hated that thing. They're like, that's not going to work. It's going to break. Somebody's going to hurt themselves. We're going to get in trouble. There's always reasons why you couldn't do it. I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe you can. And so this is another one of those projects where I had to work with a marketing team. I had to work with engineering to get the thing created. It was a really exciting type of project and a really exciting time that was relevant to what I was really into, making people better, performance design. Am I a sport guy? I'm kind of not. I don't watch any mainstream sports. I watch action sports periodically. I'm out jumping around my skateboard pretending I'm cool, where I'm over 6'5". I don't belong anywhere near a skateboard. I'm trying, but I like making people better functionally as well as mentally. And these types of projects, that's exactly what they are. So for me, moving forward in my career up until about 4 years ago, I was like, okay, I've had a pretty good run on different projects. I want to mix it up a little bit. So I decided, with my 2.1 high school GPA and then a 3.5 GPA in college, Art Center, one of the best design schools in the world. I was going to go back to school and do something really dumb. I went and finished my MBA. 3.8 GPA. So for me, I was 6'2", 140 pounds in high school, skinny kid. I'm now just over 6'5", 240. I continued to grow physically. Mentally, it took me 5 years to probably get to where I should have been 5 years prior, but when I got it, I got it. And I think that's the big thing here with all of this, is just being patient and learning about yourself and find your own way. Don't judge yourself off of other people. There's your little motivational speech for the day. And so one of the things that I'm doing now is I'm doing sketchbooks for kids. If you want to learn how to do footwear design, one of my projects in school was to do a footwear sketchbook called Draw. And you can Google them, they're online, they're like $12. It's a template. It's really inexpensive. You show yourself how to draw shoes. I've been selling these things all over the world. I paid for this one project in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It was just something fun, passionate to the education design that I'm into. It was really exciting and worthwhile. Again, as we go through and figure out what you're good at, I have this on my wall in my studio at home just to remind me of what I'm doing, because I do so many different things. This is really valuable. This is really important that you kind of go back and reflect on who you are, what you've done, maybe what you haven't done. What are you capable of doing? And at the end of the day, what's really important is you just have to understand yourself. Don't worry about what your teachers call you, what your friends call you. That's not important. It's what you call yourself. And so for me, it's always about passion and just having fun and not taking things too seriously and just doing the best you can do. That's what it's all about. Thank you.